Am I on now? You can hear. Okay. Well, thank you again for coming. I know that the liturgy was long, and so we certainly want to welcome everybody to be with us during this talk. As Father talked about, we're going to focus in on the Eucharist tonight. And here is the document. The document is 31 pages long, but it won't take us that long because I'm going to summarize very quickly because I'm not going to read 31 pages to you. But it's 31 pages long, and what we're going to do is just give a summary, an indication of what's going on in the message. So, every year the bishops meet together, and they have a meeting in Washington, D.C. It's actually in Baltimore now. But anyway, they meet there, and they wanted to do a document that would foster Eucharistic adoration. And so the name of the document is The Mystery of the Eucharist in the Life of the Church. And so that's the title is very important. The Mystery of the Eucharist in the Life of the Church. And the document is actually in two parts. The first part is about the gift of the Eucharist to us. The second part, and I'm just summarizing real quickly, the second part is our response to that gift of the Eucharist, as God gives it to us. And so they met in Baltimore, as I said, and they took an electronic vote. And so there were 222 bishops in favor of the document as it is. There were 8 that were against it, and there were 3 abstentions. In other words, they abstained from voting. And so anyway, it was a 95% consensus, which is really, really quite high. And so, as I said, the document is divided into 2 sections. First, Christ's gift of himself in the Eucharist. And secondly, our response to that gift every day of our lives. And so the document, unfortunately, there was a Pew investigation sobre the Eucharist in which they asked people, and Father Dustin was kind of clarifying. They didn't ask if they believed in the real presence. They asked if they believed in transubstantiation. Is that right? Okay. And so, we don't know how correct that is, that Pew balloting, but 51% of the people said they did not believe in the transubstantiation. And so, it's questionable. I think if they would have put it in just terms that people would understand, like real presence, then I think, it would have been totally different, the response. But anyway, so this document, more than anything, emphasizes the real presence But the real presence, as they say, in cathedrals, in parish churches, and even in little tiny poor chapels, the Eucharistic presence of Christ, among us. So the gift of the Eucharist recalls that there is nothing less than sharing in the life of God. And they stress over and over again in the document the Eucharist as a sacrifice. Now, we always talk about the sacrifice of the Mass, but people don't really understand what that means. And so the document goes into great detail into talking about the sacrifice of God on the cross. We have this beautiful cross, right, that I look at all the time, of Jesus on the cross. And they want to stress this sacrifice as a representation of the sacrifice of Christ on the cross, by which we are all called to live in God's presence among us. Another essential aspect is the real presence in the reality, as they say, the reality that we in the Eucharist acknowledge the bread and wine are truly transformed into the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. Without ceasing, to appear bread and wine to our other five senses. And so, although the Eucharist tastes like bread, and although it tastes like wine, we truly believe by our faith that the Eucharist is transformed through transubstantiation, that wonderful phrase, into the body and blood of Christ. So, next, the doctrine turns to our response. So the first part is all on Christ, the sacrifice. Secondly, the sacrifice of the Mass, and the gift that is God's presence with us in the Eucharist. The second part now turns to our response to the gift of the Eucharist. And the bishops say, having been sanctified by the gift of the Eucharist and filled with faith, hope, and charity, the faithful are called to respond to this gift. Indeed, it is only natural that we should give thanks to God for all He's given us. Our gratitude is the best expression when we take a faithful, active participation in the liturgical celebration. And so I'm having trouble reading my own writing. That's pretty bad. But basically what they're saying is that during the Eucharistic celebration, we are invited to be grateful, to be full of thanksgiving for the Eucharist that is given to us. And that is basically the response. So finally, they come to the conclusion of the document, and I'm not going to talk a long time tonight, But I will ask, I want you to feel very free to ask questions. And I have read the document, and so there might be some questions that you have dealing with the document, and we can talk about that, okay? So anyway, in conclusion, the document recalls that Eucharist is food for our Christian journey, one that pushes us to engage in the Church's mission to evangelize others. And so if you notice, at the end of the liturgy, the priest says, you know, go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life. And so we glorify God through our lifestyle, through living, you know, the gospel message every day. And especially, what they're really stressing is the missionary aspect of, we're all to be missionaries. I had the fortune to be a missionary in Peru for 10 years, but we're all called to be missionaries in that we, through our lifestyle, we express very beautifully the presence of God in us. And so, at the very end of the celebration, we who have received Christ in his body and have been incorporated more profoundly into his mystical body are likewise sent out to proclaim the good news for the salvation of the world. And so that missionary aspect is very important, I think. And the bishops spend at least a couple pages showing us, especially through Pope Francis, his talks on the missionary aspect of the church. And they also quote quite extensively John Paul II, the saint. And so it's exciting to think of what the Lord is doing. So anyway, that is the presentation. It's a very quick summary. And I will now, field whatever questions you have, and hopefully I can answer them through the document. So, anyone have any questions? There's this great silence. Well, it talks about, for instance, the Liturgy of the Word, where the Word is spoken and proclaimed very beautifully. Then it goes into the actual Eucharistic sacrifice, and it talks about that too. And so it's quite explicit in many ways. What I did was print up the 31 pages, but it's to me it's a beautiful thing. He also they talk about people who approach the sacrament unworthily and say they're in mortal sin or something like that. And then they talk about how inappropriate their coming to the Eucharist is. And so they're very explicit in saying that we should prepare. One of the nice things about your parish here is that your pastor hears confessions before every Eucharist, and and so you have the opportunity to go to confession. Not that I'm saying that all of you have mortal sins, but confession is such a richness for us, and I see my confessor once a month. I should probably do it twice a month, but I don't want to try his patience. So usually it's once a month for spiritual direction. He's my director also, and confessor. And so, but I love celebrating the sacrament, and I love hearing confessions. It's a great privilege to bring people closer to Christ through this sacrament, like all the sacraments. So, anyone else? Well, I want to thank you, all of you, very much for being here faithfully each night, and hopefully that the mission was fruitful in your life, and just know that at St. Meinrad we pray for people all the time, and if you ever have any intentions, send them to Brother Basil, and then you will have a whole community praying for you and your intention. So, good. Anyone else? Well, thank you. You're welcome. Yes, I got it online, and I printed it up, but I have it in plastic, but... So what's the title? The title is The Mystery of the Eucharist in the Life of the Church. It's a long title. The Mystery of the Eucharist in the Life of the Church. You can put the U.S. Okay, Dunstan, help me. It's USCCB, right?
Yeah, well, I just pulled it up on Google. I just typed exactly what you said in, and it's the first thing is a PDF file, which is from the USCCB website.
Yeah. So, United States Catholic bishops. So, good. Anyway, thank you again. I knew that this evening would be fairly short because we had the Mass, which was wonderful that we got to celebrate first and then talk about it. So, good. Have a good night. Yes.